So welcome to another Wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander, and today we're taking a look at, it's an older game, relatively speaking, from Legion Wargames, and it's called Redvers Reverse. And this is the Battle of Colenso 1899. Now, I know what you're thinking, never heard of this one before. Obviously, this is not the hottest topic in wargaming, but it to me is one that's very interesting. And that's one of the things that Legion Wargames does, is they cover topics which don't have 100 games about them. So you're always going to get at least a learning experience in their titles. For me, games about the Boer War, this is Second Anglo-Boer War, but, you know, periods that involve the British Armed Forces, you know, other than World War I and World War II and the Falklands, is always something fascinating to me. I like history. Obviously this plays to things that I know about, that I've watched, you know, there's bits and pieces of in history that I've learned about, but this is a way to have it on the table and to kind of really get into the meat of some of it. Now, this is a solitaire-only game. You play as the British, and it's about your command and control structure and trying to get your different brigades to do sometimes anything, or mostly what you want and need them to do in a timely fashion. In this one, you're trying to cross the Talega River, and basically across the river there's a hill, and at the top of which there's a line of emplacements and entrenchments that the Boers are sat in, and you have to get across the river, charge up the hills, get them out, because the end effect of this is you get across the river, up the hill, get past the Boers, so that you can go and relieve this the siege of Ladysmith, where a large separate large British force was being besieged by Boers over there. So that's the kind of the purpose of this of the operation here. So what does this game offer? The point of it all for me is the biggest part, and if you play this you'll be like, okay, great. It's about the command system. It is, and I it's so funny, and I mean that because I've never played a war game before where my commanders wouldn't do what I say. In this one, that can be the case, and it's just, it's exasperating at times, but like it like it makes the game enjoyable. It's just like, it's a totally different situation than I've had in any other game where I'm like, okay, you need to go and do this, you need to go and do that, you need to go and do this. You know, you move your chits around. In this one, your leaders of each of the different brigades have a rating from A, B, or C. A being they're really good, B being just kind of normal, or C being they're very cautious. I think it's and the A's are very aggressive, more like charge forward. And you're like, no, hold the line. And the cautious guys are like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to risk my men. So basically, you issue all these orders and say, this is, you know, you put them out on the board. This is where you need to go, and then the first thing you do is you roll how long does it take the runners to get to those people and for them to actually relay the orders properly. So you're rolling on a little chart to see if they even receive the orders in the first place, and if they do, how many turns later before they begin to implement it. Okay. Then you roll on, you know, when the leaders receive their orders, then you roll on a chart to see, do they implement them or not? Because there are times where the leaders will be like, no, that's ridiculous, I'm not going to make that charge, we're not going to do it, because they're super cautious. Or there's ones who are super aggressive and they're like, nah, that's not aggressive enough, let's go charge the guns, and they are like full-blownsies running across the board when they should be being slightly more cautious, or at least in line, waiting for artillery battery support, and they're just like running out in the middle of nowhere, and that's really a core of what the British part of this is. It's an exercise in the total lack of any technology and trying to keep some form of a command structure in the chaos and of battle, and it's fun, it's enjoyable to do, it's cool. At times it's mega frustrating, and it makes the game really difficult as well. The other part is obviously showing the different tactical outlook, situations, and doctrines between the two armed forces. So the Boers literally will just sit there on the ridge and shoot you, and they will not leave their entrenchments until they feel like until they've got you outnumbered, basically, and they're like moving out to kind of mop up enemy forces, because they don't need to. They can sit there in this rough terrain, in all these emplacements behind all these rocks, and just sit there and basically snipe you to death. And eventually the British forces will break if they don't make any advances, and if they don't go and kind of basically go over the top, so to speak, and kind of charge these lines and get them out of there. So it's very, very interesting. It's a very different tactical situation from a lot of other games that I've played. You do get neat history, and again, the command system, it takes a little bit of time to get used to, and I'll kind of show you why. Just there's this kind of cycle of these couple of markers that you're making over and over again. But it's a very, very interesting game, to say the least. What I'll do is I'll show you the board, and then we'll kind of come back together for some final thoughts. So here's a look at the board, and as you can see, this is effectively the actual map. There's a few kind of boxes here, holding boxes, some of which are joined to this map, and that's for scoring victory points if you get that far, and if you, well, and units that basically break the Boer lines come through and they go towards Ladysmith. That forces, it, reduces the Boers' confidence, and it can make them lose that way. But really, the map is this section here. You do have some really nice kind of play charts for a solo game. What I mean by that is the entire sequence of play is listed right down here. And they even give you this little step marker here with a little arrow so that you can just follow it down. And that becomes really important, because when it gets to things like the firing phases, then you skip over to this side, and you've got the Boer fire procedure and the British fire procedure, where you have another little step marker, and you kind of go through this, and then when you're done with that, you go back down here. So it's actually a neat little way to keep track of everything. And why that's really important for me is everything is on here, so that effectively between this and your like this are your charts and tables, you shouldn't need the rulebook once you're done with it. And the rulebook itself is not very taxing. I mean, it's literally like 10 pages of actual rules, but you should be able to read it, and then everything is on here. Usually it's very explicit on here of what you should do. Only things like some of the movement and losses and things, you need to have read the rules so that you know how to apply losses and what the consequences are. But it really goes through in these, Boer movement phase segment, and then it goes through some bullet points of all the things you do in that order going down the line. So really, really neat, and it's a very handy way to do it all. But tactically speaking, this is how the game, the historical game, starts out. You basically have this line of Boers, and they're all hidden and in what's called emplacements, and they're on the north side of the river. And you sit down here with your forces. You've got to cross a bunch of open ground, and then you've got to cross the river, which is not easy to do. Then you've got to fight all in this rough terrain, and then get through it to try and relieve the siege of Ladysmith. If you can do that successfully, congratulations, you're a better general than I am. This is a very tough one to win, but that's, to me, a good solo game should have a lot of challenge in it. If it's a pushover that just loses its charm for me, it's boring. There are variants in this one, which is nice. This is kind of the historical setup, just how it was. There's a whole bunch, you can kind of see some of them down here, of options that you can do. There's like things that make it easier for the British, things that make it harder from the British. So if you want to up or lower the difficulty, you can do that. But what they really say is you should pick one or two of each positive and negative, and they've got different values, like -1, -2, +1, +2. If you pick one or two of each, so it's a net 0, you'll have, in theory, a balanced game that's still different and fresh and gives you a different tactical situation and lookout from what the kind of core game is. So that's nice that they included that as well. Now, the major part of this game, the part that for me makes it really, really good, is the command system. There's a kind of bunch of different chits down here. But basically, you start the game with these commands, and what they actually have on the map is the historical objectives are actually printed on the map for kind of the first turn initially. So if you want to kind of do the historical scenario, you place all of these planned objective markers out on the board. So this is the 2nd Artillery Brigade of planned objective. You put it here in the historical objective space. You have the 5th Irish. Their planned objective was to come over Bridle Drift and to cross this, come to this ground. And then the 4th Light, they were coming over here to the central front line. And then we had the Naval Artillery Brigade, we're going to come here. And basically, so you can follow this. 2nd English are coming up here. This is the Naval Artillery section. And then we have 1st Artillery. And then we have 6th Fusiliers. And then we have our mounted. We're going over here. So if you want to play the historical setup, this is effectively your line of advance. All of these brigades are going to go and fill out this line. So you can see you make a big front, you're going to attack, come across, and that's what's going to happen. So if you want to play historically, that's how you would set it up. But the reality is you can attack any places you want. You can put these wherever you want, and that's the planned objective. So once you put all of these out, what you then do is you're going to roll on this British Send Orders table. And you basically take a distance from General Buller, who's the overall commander, and he's sat with his little British HQ here on top of Shooter's Hill. So you count the distance from him to where everyone else is, and that's you cross-reference that column and row on the table to see what and when they get their orders. So let's get our little dice tray out, and effectively what we're going to do is we're going to just go down the line and see what happens. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll roll for our 2nd Artillery Brigade. Ideally we want them to come over here, so what we do is we roll 2d6, and we count from General Buller. They are 1, 2 spaces away. So they're 2 areas away, and we rolled it's a 9. So on a 2 through 10, their orders arrive. That's great. However, they arrive the next turn. And so what that means is, these guys will do this, but they ain't going to do it now. So it takes some time for those orders to be relayed over here, and for them to be implemented, and for them to even start moving out. So this is our planned objective. We take our regular objective marker, and we put it on the game turn track for the next turn. And we do the same thing for our 5th Irish. Roll the dice, and we roll a 7. So that's also within this range. Orders are going to arrive, but not until next turn. Now, these ones are much closer, right? So we've got our 4th Light. Our 4th Light are 1 area away, so it's even more likely that the orders get there. Oh, we're pushing it though. That 11 is only just within our range of the orders arriving. They do arrive, and the good news is, because they're only 1 area away, it was quicker, so they get issued on the same turn. So, ooh, I put the wrong one in. Our planned objective there. Our regular objective goes onto the turn track again, but it goes onto the same turn that we are. And then we've got our Naval Artillery Brigade. They're 1 space away also. We're good. So that's also going to go onto this part of the turn track. And then we have, let's see, our 1st Artillery Brigade. They're good as well. So our 1st Artillery Brigade, they're going to make it. This is nice. And our Naval Artillery Section, they also are good. That's going to get triggered right now. And then our 2nd English, they are also good. Okay, good. Just want to make sure. Now we start getting into this space further away, so our orders may not even get there. And we rolled a 4 for the 6th Fusiliers. That's nice. And we're going to roll for our Mounted. And our Mounted's also good. That's nice. However, the Fusiliers and the Mounted, again, because they're 2 spaces away, they're going to pop up on the next turn. And it's this really interesting kind of cycle that happens. So that's doing all this. And then we have our British Receive Orders segment. So what we do now is we get basically all of the objectives from that part of the turn track from today, basically, from right now. And now we see what they even do. So let's start with the 2nd English. So the 2nd English are commanded by Major General Hilliard. Now, Major General Hilliard has a B on him. So we go to our British Receive Orders table, and B is good. And so we're going to roll on this chart to see what happens. So 2d6, and we rolled an 8. So 5 through 10, as ordered. He receives his orders, that's great. So what we can do is, this isn't a planned objective, this is a real objective now. Okay, so these guys, 2nd English, will advance into Colenso. That will happen. That's great. And they will continue to execute that order until they basically make it. And so then we'll go to our Naval Artillery section. Our Naval Artillery section is by Lieutenant Ogilvy. So this could be a mess. We got 2d6 and we rolled a 6, and he's a C, which is cautious. And C on cautious, 2 through 6, ignore order. So he received his orders, but he's not going to carry them out. And quite simply, our Naval Artillery section, we take that planned objective off the board, and we're going to have to yell at him even louder next turn to basically get a move on. So not great. Our 1st Artillery Brigade is commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Hunt. He's also very cautious, so let's see if we can't roll high. And we rolled a 5, 6, 7. That's pretty good. 7 through 11, he's going to go as ordered, so that's nice. Artillery, 1st Artillery is going to become a regular objective over here. They're going to march across the board, set up a battery so they can fire from a westerly direction. So that's good. And then we've got our Naval Artillery Brigade, which is commanded by Captain Pitcairn Jones. Come on. And we rolled a 4, so he's also a C for cautious. 2 through 6, he ignores the orders, so great. He's not going to do anything. And this is where like the game is both frustrating and difficult, but also fun. You have to throw your arms up, like it's just kind of fun. It's like, good gracious, I have to go over there personally and yell at them myself to do it, because these guys are, they're being way too cautious. And then the last one, we've got our 4th Light. We wanted to get them to come up here. He's a B, so he's pretty good. Roll those 2d6. Oh, fantastic. We rolled a 2, which means he's going to ignore the orders as well. And as unlikely as that was, that's what happened. So, with what we've got going on right now, when it comes to kind of our movement section, the Fusiliers, 1st Artillery Brigade, 2nd English, they're the only ones that are actually going to do anything. Yeah, so, oops, I put the wrong one here for the Mounted. Oh, and for the Fusiliers. They're not rolling until next time. Those should be planned objective markers, that's my bad. Okay, good. Yeah. So really we've got 1, 2, these are the only 2 that are doing anything. These other artillery sections I'm going to have to yell at and make them do that more. Basically, you then get into, there's an emergency withdrawal segment, which if you had a bunch of guys that are injured with heavy morale losses, that's when they would potentially retreat or anything like that. Then you have a shell fire phase. There's 2 Boer artillery units here on Colenso copies, and, well, just south of Red Hill as well. Or on Red Hill, I apologize. So there's an artillery section basically, but everyone's out of range. But you would roll with some targeting priorities, and you do some suppression or some disruption, things like that, if they can fire decently enough. And then there's a recovery segment, and then the British would shoot back. But again, everyone's out of range. Artillery is all limbered, and we've got to get it up here so that then we can open fire. But later in the game, it becomes a bit more important. And then basically it comes to the movement section. And the movement, as you might expect, quite slow. Everyone's walking. The mounted are somewhat faster, but our mounted units haven't received their orders yet, so they're not actually going to do anything. But basically what you do, you have your little brigade move marker, and you just go left to right, and you start with these guys. Well, they don't receive their orders yet, so they're not going to do anything. Same thing with the 5th Irish. These guys ignored their orders. So did they. And then we'll go. Let's start with Lieutenant Colonel Hunt. He actually has an objective. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to limber our artillery. And our artillery have 2 movement points. But it costs 1 to limber. Oh, they start limbered, I think. I believe they start limbered. So we're actually going to move 1, 2. You have to take the shortest route. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So we want to go this way. That also keeps us out of range, which is why the map's made the way that it is. So they've moved. The problem is they have these 2 movement factors, and it costs 1 to unlimber. So we're going to be able to move here next time. Then you have to wait a whole nother turn to unlimber, basically. But that's just kind of what it is. These guys ignored their orders. Our green 2nd English, they are moving into Colenso, but we're all on foot, so we're really slow. So we're just going to move 1 space. And these guys haven't received their orders yet. You can move your commanders. So let's move, let's see, Colonel Long. We are going to leave him there because he can issue an order to them next time. And these guys, he's going to flip over to his movement, and then we're going to move up so that we can yell at these guys next time and tell them to basically get their ideas together and go for it. Then there would be kind of assault, there'd be fire, but everyone's out of range. Early game, it's more about positioning and getting your troops even to form some kind of battle line. So basically, what I would do is then, you know, you can go through all this, you can go to the next turn, and you have far fewer orders. At the beginning of the game, everyone gets an order, basically. But what you get is effectively, if Buller is with the HQ, and the HQ is on his move side, you get 3 orders. So we'll only actually get 1, probably. But you'll roll for these orders that you issued a whole turn earlier to finally get them going. So it's trying to get some coherency through, where you have, you know, some cooperation between your brigades, so they can all attack together on some kind of front, or trying to get them to, in an organized way, advance instead of some guy charging. Because if you start rolling really high on these charge the guns, man, they just go all out. And, you know, it's hard to kind of rein them in almost. They get ahead of your lines, and they just move in and start attacking, when they might be on their own, they might be isolated, things like that. But that's what this game is about, really. The fire combat is kind of what you would expect. You know, each of these has a combat value. These guys are a 4. I think a lot of them are 4s that are just infantry units. Your mounted units, they're on their move side, but on their unmounted side it kind of flips. So you basically add all of those together. Here's a bunch of modifiers if you're British, or a bunch of modifiers if you're the Boers, and you apply losses to each other. It's really tough because all these units are hidden, So once you move in, or once they shoot you, these hidden markers go away. But these hidden markers are a -2. So really, for the British, you have to either get into melee as quick as possible, or effectively take a volley of fire from all the hidden units. Then they become unhidden. Then you can actually hit them, because it's very, very difficult to hit them whilst they're still hidden, because they'll be hidden and in an emplacement that's -4 already. Usually your units are a 4. You might get 1+1 from multiple attacks against the target, but you need a 7 or, you know, really an 8 or more to even do anything in rifle fire, so you have to get them hit out of their hidden. If you get into melee, they lose their entrenchment bonuses, because you're just hand-to-hand at that point. But, you know, that's what you're trying to do, but being able to execute, it's the very difficult part. Because really, the command part of this is, to me, the very interesting and fun part of this game. If you can get it to go, you can get the combats rolling, make a breakthrough, it's great, but it's such a fun command system because it's just so unknown. So much ridiculousness can happen to you. And it's an exercise in learning about, you know, the limitations of a wide open battlefield that's constantly moving, lack of any form of technology with regards to communication, and just, you know, trying to make it all work together. You know, there was also some huge, massive tactical blunders by the English in this one, but it's still a neat experience and a good one to play, and also a fascinating piece of history. So, combat's combat, but the command system is what's really fun about this, trying to get these guys to just do anything. And, you know, there comes a point in the game where you're aggressive and good leaders, you're like, yes, I love you guys, and boy, these cautious guys, the ones from the 6th Fusiliers, the mounted, oh my gosh, you just get so frustrated at your own commanders. And it's fun, it's got a cool narrative to it, I enjoy it, it's interesting. So what we'll do, we'll wrap up here with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the map. It's... I enjoy the layout. You know, you got the actual map, and then you've got all the different sequences of play, and the like the fire procedure stuff, and you just kind of go through it all. It can seem daunting at first because there's so much text on the map itself as well, but it's really not that bad. A couple things with this one though, because I think it came out in 2017 maybe? 2017. It's, what I will say is, we're going to be friendly about it. Legion Wargames' production and development has gotten much better since this one was put out. This suffers from a few, like the counters were really hard to punch in this one. And the rules... If they wrote the rules today, I think they'd be much better. Only because, like, I've played modern, like, new Legion Wargames, and their rules are, yeah, great. But this one, it's a little older. The rules are all there, but sometimes the rule you need is buried in a paragraph. It just could be easier to reference. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But any questions that I had, everything's on Board Game Geek in the forums. The designer Jeff Noble and the developer Godfrey Noble, they were very active, and probably still are, but they answered, you know, all the questions when the game first came out. So anything that I was unsure about was on there, so that wasn't that big a deal. But the play aids were good, but yeah, there are times the rules I wanted them to be a bit more explicit, or maybe organized in less of a narrative way, but that's my preference. I like a bit more kind of bullet pointy and more of an instruction manual. I felt like sometimes it was just talking about the rules, but that's a nitpick at best. And then again, the counters. If you get this, make sure, like, I used a hobby knife to cut out each of the bits, each of kind of the rows, and then you could pull them apart normally, but some of the attachment points are pretty big. So you just want to be careful with it. It takes a little bit of force to get them off. Again, their new games don't have that problem. It's just an older title of theirs, and they've improved since then, but just know that going in. But all in all, the game itself, and that's the really important part, is very, very fun to play. It is very, very difficult to win this game too. I've played it a few times now. I mean, I played this back in 2017, and this was before we ever did any video reviews or anything. There's an old written review on our blog, and so I wanted to revisit and make a video, basically, because I've had the time to sit and play more of it, and there's some kind of story behind that. But it's as fun as I remember, and I don't mean this. I don't mean it in a negative way. It is just hilarious. You know, this is the only game where you, as kind of the supreme battlefield commander, cannot get things done. You just cannot get, and it's not because, oh, you don't have enough orders, which you won't, but it's because when you do issue the orders, man, your your leaders have personalities. They have their little ratings, and they'll do what they want to do, and it adds some really cool flavor to it, but boy, it makes it very difficult to make a coordinated assault on these really strong war positions. And you'll take a ton of strength point losses. And the attrition's pretty bad. And then if you look at the history of this, the British had, I think, it's just like over 16,000 troops, and the Boers were outnumbered 4-1. I think they had like 4,500 troops. Just guys with rifles, and they're all sat in their encampments, and they inflicted, I think they killed about like 150 odd people, inflicted a lot of casualties though, and just the morale was broken, and the British forces couldn't make any progress, and kind of called it off. It was basically a disaster for them. But all in all, I had a blast playing this one, and if it's something you're interested in, this is a great game about that period, but also a great game about command and control before there's field telephones and radios, basically. That in and of itself is something that is to be lauded, and it was just a very cool experience. And if you want a challenging solo game, this is a really cool place to start as well. So appreciate you guys tuning in. This has been Redvers Reverse, the Battle of Colenso 1899, and I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.